Mate, it's me, Willie, the Tapwise Owl. Down under, we've got a cheeky little game called Two Facts and a Fib. Reckon you can spot the porky? Number 1. Before hitting record, Andrew swore blind that this was a ripper idea and that my true blue Aussie accent would be a smash hit with all you crafty beer professionals on the YouTubes. Number 2. Tapwise makes it dead easy to run your beer club and bring your mates back to the bar with your very own branded brewery app. Monthly subs are a breeze, perks and rewards tick along on autopilot, and the cash lands in your bank account every night, you business legend. Number 3. In the past year, breweries have pulled in nearly 100,000 extra chatroom visits and raked in over $1 million in recurring revenue with apps of their own. Got the fib? Right, mate. Andrew reckoned this was a bugger idea, but joke's on him. I went and did it anyway. So book a demo today and let's show Andrew you're keen on packed taprooms, steady revenue, and of course me, Willie, the Tapwise Owl. Cheers, Cobber. Now enough chinwag. Let's get on to the learny bit.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining me today. My name is David Nilsen. I am a full-time food and beverage writer and educator from near Dayton, Ohio, and my primary area of focus is craft beer. And today I'm going to talk to you about staff beer education for customer service. And that customer service component is really the emphasis that we're going to look at. There are lots of different types of staff education that you can provide. All of them can be useful. You can do cross-training in different areas of the brewery. You can do sensory training for QA, QC panels. All of that can be important. What we're going to focus on is staff beer education for your frontline service staff, your servers, your bartenders, for the purpose of giving your customers the best possible experience. So let's talk a little bit about what that's going to look like. I want to talk initially about the benefits of providing your service staff with beer education. The main goal of this is customer satisfaction. And that seems kind of obvious, right? You want your customers satisfied. But we don't often think about the importance of that beer education component for your service staff in being able to satisfy your customers when they come into your brewery. When they come to your brewery, they've made a choice to have a particular experience. They could go to another restaurant to eat. They can get beer at the grocery store. They've made a choice to come to your brewery, which means they have some kind of expectation in mind. So they're providing your staff with the tools to be able to give them the best experience possible can lead to repeat visits. First timers can turn into regulars. They tell their friends about it. You get that word of mouth marketing, and they bring other folks in. This can lead to higher ticket totals. Some of that is at the moment of service. If they're having a good time, they're more likely to stick around for another, round of drinks or get dessert or whatever. But there are also some specific ways that your staff training can actually encourage higher ticket amounts. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit later on. And then finally, for your service staff themselves, all of these things are going to lead to better tips for them. Higher ticket totals mean a higher percentage there going to them. And also just the possibility of building rapport with regular customers. That can all be super important. As we're going through this session, I'm going to spend the first little while talking about the why of staff beer education. Why should you be doing this, and what are the benefits? And then we're going to spend the second half of the session talking about the what, and actually looking at what your first initial sessions should focus on when you're sitting down with your service staff. So the biggest concern that I often see come up from breweries when you're presenting the idea of staff beer education is, what happens if I train them and they leave? And it's a perfectly valid concern. You're looking at investing time and money and resources, and maybe that employee then walks out the door 2 months later. That can happen. But one of my colleagues in a presentation I was watching a while back made a fantastic point that the way that we need to look at that is we need to reframe it into not what happens if I train them and they leave, but what happens if I don't train them and they stay? What happens if you don't provide your service staff with the kind of tools that we're going to talk about and they're with you for the next 4 years? That's thousands of customer interactions where they are going to potentially miss opportunities to hook that customer in, give that customer deeper buy-in, give them the kind of experiences we're talking about. Also leads to the possibility of them spreading a lot of misinformation, misrepresenting your brewery, misrepresenting your beers, not with any ill intent, just because they don't necessarily have the knowledge or the tools that they needed to be able to present that well. I recall one colleague talking about a brewery that discovered their bartender, who was a good bartender, for years had been describing their stout as tasting like tar. He wasn't trying to badmouth the stout. He had tasted it once. That was the tasting note that's what it made him think of. Every palate is unique. But he then passed that along to every single customer who asked about the stout. And that's not necessarily an appealing descriptor. And so just providing a few more tools to your service staff can prevent some of those missed opportunities and some of that misinformation that can spread around. I'm going to assume that your service staff are good at their job, that they're good servers, they're good bartenders, whether they're new or they have a lot of experience. But one of the things that is unique about craft beer, this is a very, very complicated drinks segment. It is a very varied drinks segment. There is more variety within craft beer than there is in any other alcoholic drink segment. I don't say that to badmouth wine or spirits or anything else, but when you're looking at the difference between wines, the variation there is smaller than when you're looking at light lager and imperial stout and goose and IPA and just this wild range of styles. It is complicated. And if your staff, even if they are good servers, they're efficient, they're personable, they're attentive, if they don't have the specific knowledge to be able to present beer and present your beer well, then they're kind of lost in the woods without a map if you don't provide that for them. One of the important things to understand, I'm going to assume most of the folks watching this are either you're a manager, you're an owner, you are working in a position where you have service staff reporting to you. Most likely beer is a passion for you, like it is for me. This is something you love. It is your favorite drink. You love learning about it. You can never learn enough about it. For a lot of your staff, this might just be a job, and that's okay. The reality of life is that we have to work to make a living. The fact that they are looking at this as a job doesn't mean that they can't be good at that job. It doesn't mean they don't care about doing the job well, but they might not innately have a curiosity that is going to push them to learn all the things that you would love them to know. You need to provide that opportunity for them and facilitate that process for them. Some of them may end up discovering that they find this fascinating and they exceed even what you teach them. But a lot of them are not going to do that. And that doesn't mean that they're not good at their jobs. It doesn't mean that you're not doing a good job of training them. It just means you have to be able to provide that rather than just expecting it. And it means that you have to frame all of the training and education that you're giving them around helping them do their job better. This isn't just inane information that you want them to memorize to, stroke your ego. This is stuff that is going to help them do a better job and better satisfy their customers and give their customers that better experience. Let's say that you decide not to do this. You decide not to do any kind of organized staff training. You're just going to kind of drop some knowledge on your servers, your bartenders in the course of a normal day here and there as you get the opportunity. One of the problems with anytime we learn a lot about a very specific subject is that we tend to forget, once we've acquired information, we tend to forget that we ever didn't know that information. And we start to kind of take, because this is just part of like the mental ecosystem that we are living in every single day, we start to take those basic facts and make them just innate to everybody. And everybody knows these basic facts. Every piece of information you know about beer, you learned at some point. No matter how basic it is, how foundational it feels to you, at some point there was a time when you didn't know it, and then you learned it, and then you did know it. I have a friend who works in a factory. They do something with plastics. I don't really know exactly what he does. Sometimes we'll sit down for a beer. He seems stressed out. I'll be like, hey, how was your day? And he forgets that I've like never walked into that factory before and have no idea what he does. And so he'll start using all this jargon about his day. It'll be like, oh, the G60 went down, and so then our filmers wouldn't work, and all of plant B got behind on their XKAs. And like, it's like, dude, I don't know what any of that means. It sounds like you had a bad day. But he's been working there for 20 some years. And that stuff is, everybody must know that stuff because he knows it. That is the same thing that can happen to us with something that we're passionate about, like beer. I want to give you an example of if you decided to just drop some knowledge on your staff now and then. You're going to say to one of your staff members in a few minutes that you've got, these are the hops in our flagship IPA. That's a super basic piece of information, right? This is probably your best-selling beer. It's the one that they're going to serve the most. Good for them to know which hops are in it so that, you know, if a customer asks or whatever, that they know what to explain. I want to walk through the individual pieces of beer knowledge that you have to have in order for that sentence to make any sense. I'm going to bring that up on screen here. First of all, what are hops? Hops functionally have no application outside of beer. They don't show up in our lives anywhere. If you don't have knowledge about hops around beer, what is it? Is it a plant or is this a spice? I have no idea what hops are. Like, what does that mean that these are in our beer? Apparently, there are different types of hops. Do they do different things? Like, what does it mean that there are different types of hops and that these are the ones you're telling me about? What is a flagship IPA? That is a term we use in beer and in some other industries to refer to like the thing that leads the way for our business. But the metaphor flagship goes back to like World War II era naval strategy, when an admiral needed to be present with the fleet to command them. The ship that he was on had his flag on it. And so that was the flagship that commanded the rest of the fleet. That is 80 years out of date. That's not even applicable in the modern Navy anymore. And who knows anything about naval strategy? It's something that pops up in a few different industries. But if you have a 23-year-old server who's never heard that phrase, is flagship IPA a style? Is that the name of our IPA? What does that even mean? What's an IPA? I still, in public-facing education classes with just, you know, members of the public who are wanting to learn about beer, I still sometimes get asked, what's the difference between craft beer and IPA? IPA is such a massive commercial force that it feels like its own drinks segment. It almost is. So what is an IPA? What does it mean that the hops are in the beer? Are they in there right now? Am I seeing them? Like, what does that mean? How do they get added? And then finally, why does any of this matter? Are my customers going to be asking me this? What does this benefit me to be able to have this information? That's one simple phrase that any one of us could utter at any time. These are the hops in the flagship IPA. That you have to have a bunch of information to be able to do anything with. So let's talk. Hopefully this convinces you to take on some beer education at your brewery. Let's talk about how you should do that. What I'm going to walk through is 2 starting sessions that you should have with your staff. You can build beyond this, and I'll give you a few directions you can potentially go after this, but we're going to focus on what your first 2 sessions should look like. The first session you're going to have, you're not actually going to focus all that much on beer. You'll talk about it a little bit, but the whole purpose of this is to help them understand the attitude and the intent that you're looking for in these customer service interactions. Explain to them the reasons that you want them to learn this information and the benefits of that information to them. Again, this helps them do their job better. This may even earn them better tips. That is a benefit that they can hold on to, and expecting them to just want to learn this out of sheer curiosity. Hopefully some of them will demonstrate that, but it's probably unrealistic to expect it. So make sure they understand what the benefits are for them of being able to learn more about beer. Next thing you want to do is help them understand what is unique about your brewery and what you do there so that they can pass that along to your customers. Like I mentioned earlier on, customers who come into your brewery have made a choice to be there. They could be somewhere else. They've made a choice to be there. That choice might have been tenuous. Maybe they're traveling and this is the closest place to their hotel. Maybe a friend brought them along, presented them a couple options, and they said, "Sure, let's check out that brewery." Maybe they're a dedicated beer fan, and so they really want to, know about more about your brewery while we're there. Maybe they're new to the city and they're going around and checking out all the craft breweries there. Whatever it is, they've made a choice to be there. So much of a server or bartender's role beyond the basics of service is about helping hook that customer and give them buy-in to what you're doing. And there are so many details about your brewery that can help to do that you might not be thinking about. First of all, the story behind your brewery. And by that, I don't mean like 3 home brewers who had a dream. Like that is every brewery in the country. A lot of times, I'm actually going to be giving a presentation for craft beer professionals in a couple months about this. A lot of times I've discovered as a beer writer that breweries don't always recognize some of the supporting stories that they have that are really, really interesting because they aren't the main story. Did your one of your owners come from a different career background that is really interesting? Did your the founders meet at a ballroom dancing class? Like, were you formerly a coffee roaster and then you collabed with the brewery and got fascinated by beer? Like little things that don't seem like big deals are interesting points of connection for customers. So make sure your servers and bartenders know those things and know that they can drop those in conversation. The name of your brewery, you chose it for some reason. You have a reason that you named the brewery that. So make sure that the servers know that so they can pass that along to staff. Even if you are just the name of your town brewing company, that is a reason. This town helped build us. We really want to be a part of the local community. So we decided to put that right in our name. Whatever it is, make sure the servers know that. That can be a 5-second interaction with a customer that makes the customer care a little bit more about what you're doing. Your building. What's the story behind your building? It might have been custom built for your brewery. That's fine. If it wasn't, it was something else before. Even if that's something seemingly boring, it was a dry cleaner. That's actually kind of amusing, right? Like that's interesting. And if it's something more, it's something cooler than that. It was a funeral home. It was a Cadillac dealership, whatever it was. I'm always fascinated by what a building was that a brewery is in. So if a server can pass that along to a customer, that customer sitting there having their beer and thinking about this, being a former whatever, library, church, whatever it was, make sure they have that piece of information. You see ingredients and processes on the screen there. We're going to talk later about what you can explain to your staff about your brewing processes and your brewing ingredients. What I'm talking about here is what do you do that's unique that they can pass along. So if you have a cool ship, you get the majority of your malt from a craft malt house that's 20 miles down the road. You have visible spirit barrels that are on racks in the tap room. Things like that are just a little bit off the beaten path from every other brewery. Make sure your customer understands those are there because there are going to be those craft beer fans. A lot of casual fans might not know what that is, but a little bit more committed fan might be really excited to know that you have horizontal lagering tanks or whatever it is. So give them some of those little tidbits. Finally, your beer names. You chose those for a reason. Maybe you have an organizing theme that you use, whatever it is, but the name of a beer can be an interesting hook. If a customer is looking at a list and they don't have any particular reason to choose one over the other, they might choose the one that has the amusing name. And if the server can say, funny story about that, that's actually the name of our bartender's grandmother's dog. She brought it in the day we were brewing that beer and somebody suggested it and it just stuck. And now that is whatever, Fido IPA. Having a little bit of an information about the beer names that you're using can be an important little point of connection that can, again, give those customers a little bit deeper buy-in. When your customers ask a question, your servers need to be prepared to answer those. One of the common things they're going to be asked that is more significant than they maybe realize is for recommendation or for their favorite beer. So if a customer is looking at a menu, server comes up to ask if they're ready to order, and they say, I don't know, do you have a favorite beer on here? Or what do you recommend? That can sound like just indecision or wishy-washiness or relatively innocuous. That's actually a huge opportunity. That customer is expressing a little bit of vulnerability and curiosity. They're saying, I'm putting my experience into your hands. Recommend something for me. They're also letting you know that they are open to what you're going to choose. If there were things they didn't want, then they would have made their choice. But by saying that, they're putting themselves into the server's hands and letting them kind of control some of that experience. So the server needs to have an answer. They need to be able to say, oh, I really like such and such beer, or, you know what, when the weather is like this, I would recommend going for such and such. That customer did not have a decision made. So any reason that they give is that customer is probably going to be able to go along with. So strongly encourage your servers and bartenders to have answers ready for recommendations and favorites. And then you might get some more specific beer technical questions. We're not expecting your servers to know the answers to those, but they need to be able to say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that, but I will get you an answer. Go and ask the bar manager, the brewers there, go and ask them. Probably on the back end, have some policy there for if the answer is not in-house, that manager can get information from the customer to get back to them with an answer when they get it. Make sure you're following up on that. Probably what your servers are getting asked more than anything else, especially if you have a restaurant, is what's the closest thing you have to Bud Light or some other light lager? A little bit less common, what's the closest thing you have to Blue Moon? What's the closest thing you have to Guinness? They might even, at this point, with its ubiquity in convenience stores, what's the closest thing you have to Voodoo Ranger? Things like that. Those sound like silly questions, but I guarantee you your servers are getting asked them. So make sure that they are equipped with the right answer for those most common beers that they're going to be asked for. Let the customer know if it's not an exact match. If they said Miller Lite and what you have is a German Pilsner, say, yeah, you know what? We have a beer that's going to have some similar flavors. It's a little bit more robust than that, but I think you'll really enjoy it. You want me to go get you a pint of that? That customer is probably a little bit defensive, maybe a little bit sheepish. Maybe they haven't fully bought in. Maybe a friend brought them to this place and all they ever drink is one beer. That interaction lets them know that, yes, there is something here they can enjoy, and it's okay that they asked that question, and you've got something prepared for that. Final thing I would encourage you to let your customer or your servers know is at the end of service, there's a couple questions that can be really, really helpful to turn back onto the customer. First of all, at the end, ask them what their favorite was. What was your favorite beer that you had here? They may be deciding that in that moment as they say it, but now that they've said it, it's real. Now that beer is their favorite that they just had. And even better, if you have beer to go, have your customers, your servers say, awesome, we have that in 6-packs. You want to take a 6-pack with you? I can get that rung up for you. Also, have them ask the customer if they want any merch. So often the merch area of a tap room is just like this no man's land, and we're just assuming the customers are going to wander over and figure it out themselves. Exit through the gift shop. You probably can't physically have that work that way, but have your servers say, hey, we have some cool merch on your way out. Take a look. We've got some, shirts and hats, and there's actually some dog toys that have our logo on them. Just like remind them that is there to look at. Our second session is where we're actually going to get into the basics of beer itself from a technical standpoint. And the important thing for you to understand as the facilitator of this, but also for you to pass on to your service staff for them to understand, is that the goal with this is not memorization. You're not expecting them to become beer experts or brewers. The goal here is familiarity. The way I like to frame this is that the tools you're going to give them, you're basically building them a bookshelf for them to put information on as they learn it, rather than expecting them to read and memorize all the books that are on that shelf when you give it to them. So you're giving them a framework and a familiarity so that going forward, as they learn this information, they understand where it fits. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to include in this. First thing is the concept of styles. And I phrase it that way, concept, because we're not expecting them to acquire a systematic taxonomy of beer styles and understand what all of them are. You need to explain to them what beer styles are. This isn't something that really exists in most other drink segments. Wine is differentiated by the grapes and where they were grown and when they were harvested. It's all grapes. It's all made basically the same way. Beer, though, is different. Beer has lots of different ingredients and variations within those and different proportions they can be added in and when certain ingredients can be added. Help them understand what it means that there are different styles of beer. To do that, then we're going to talk a little bit about beer ingredients and the brewing process. Not super technical, and you're not expecting them to memorize this. You're giving them familiarity. This is going to help them understand that concept of styles, because when you have an imperial stout and a Munich Helles, this seems like these should not even be the same category of drink. And yet when you understand beer ingredients and the brewing process a little bit, you understand these actually are more or less, and these are very, very similar. They're more or less like the same drink. There's just some differences in the basic types of ingredients that you were adding and the proportions you were adding them in, but like these have more in common than they have in difference. And it kind of helps you organize that information a little bit more. Then we're going to get into talking about your specific beers. If you have a niche that your brewery does, you do classic lagers, you're a hazy IPA house, whatever it is, help them understand that a little bit, because if this is the first brewery they've worked in, then you are all breweries to them. So you need to help them understand what is different there. Walk through your core beers, help them. I would encourage you to taste through those core beers with them. And this is critical. The last point on this slide here. Help them with having enticing descriptions for their beers. This is going to help you avoid the bartender who tells everybody who comes through the door that the stout tastes like tar. He's not necessarily wrong for his palate if that's what made him think about it, but that's not enticing. That's not appealing. Workshop with your staff 3 or 4 words that can go along with a beer so that when a customer asks about it, they have something ready at hand and they don't have to make something up. That one's bright, a little bit fruity, very easy drinking. That one has notes of coffee and chocolate, really cozy with this fall weather. Just simple, appealing descriptions that they can use and helping them replace potential negative descriptions that you would not want them to use. After you've given them this information going forward, education can continue in a more formal way, or it can become much more informal from this point where you can give them information more in that as it comes up sort of way after you've given them that initial framework. This information should include new beers and seasonals. So once they have that framework, new beer comes out, let them know what it is. New stories. Your brewery isn't one story, it's lots of stories. So if you started partnering with a new nonprofit, make sure you pass that along to the customer or to the server so they can pass that on to the customer. You can get into a little bit more style detail if you want, especially focusing on the styles that you specialize in. But that's going to be dependent kind of on your specific needs and on the kind of buy-in that you're getting from your staff. Brew day. This is one I would strongly encourage you to consider. And I know that it requires a little bit more investment in time and payroll, but after a server or a bartender has been there 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is, let them spend one of their work days working with the brewer, helping out. They're not going to be helping much, but let them tag along and kind of job shadow. That is fun. It's cool. It helps them understand how this thing is made. A few weeks later, they get to taste the beer they were there for. That goes so far in terms of buy-in and investment in this thing that they've just been learning about. I would strongly encourage you to incorporate that. And throughout the entire thing, keep it fun. Make sure that this is never intimidating. Make sure that you are always explaining to your servers that this is to help them do their job better and that you are not expecting memorization from them, that you want them to be familiar with this material and that you're going to continue to help them along the way with that. And remember, just to recap from the beginning, the goal of this is the customer experience. And so the more that you can equip the part of your brewery that is interfacing with that customer to be able to give them that experience, that is going to benefit not only your staff, but the brewery itself. Staff education can feel overwhelming. It can feel like there's so much to do. Start somewhere, start with these basics, start with these 2 basic classes. The first one explaining the attitude and the intent and the customer experience. The second, the basics of beer, and build from there. If you're doing nothing right now, just start with doing something like that. You can do this internally. You can work with an outside beer educator like myself or one of my colleagues, but start with something. Thanks again so much for hanging out with me today. Hope you learned a few things. I've got all my contact information here on the screen. You can take a quick screenshot or take a photo of your screen. I'm happy to answer any questions, even if that's not us actually working together professionally. If you just have a question about something we talked about or you want to set up your own education program, definitely reach out and I'd be happy to work with you. Cheers.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this session, we'd love to see you in real life. We host in-person workshops across the country for craft beer professionals just like you that are held in some of the most exciting beer destinations around. These immersive events are designed to help you grow and connect with others. You'll meet peers from across the country and leave with actionable strategies for success. Connection has never been more important, and you can learn more at cbpconnects.com. Cheers. See you there.